Hey class, I wanted to address the question, how awkward is it to write a peer review? I've actually had a few of you be a little bit concerned about what it's like to send off a peer review. Maybe some of you are used to workshopping your artwork, your research, and you're used to a feedback process, and so this is old hat for you. But for some of you, that kind of actually very intimate world of having written your ideas on a paper and then sending them out to other people, and then if you're replying to somebody else's, you're worried about, is this going to cut a little deep? Or when you're reading somebody else's feedback and you might be thinking, well, that cut a little bit deep. I wanted to just try and give you the Keller spin on why we do this and what good can come of it. So first of all, sometimes people think in the university we're an ivory tower place where you are mollycoddled and that we just think about ridiculous things and that we aren't pragmatic and we aren't real world. And so this kind of a workshop process, I can tell you the reason I do it is because I read about creativity, I read about cognition, I read about communication, and part of what's really exciting about living in our networked world right now is that we know feedback is actually an incredible source for developing, honing your skills. So Apple does it, Pixar Studios does it, Google does it. People in environments where creativity is essential to success make these kinds of feedback events happen regularly. So this is, I hope, part of your pragmatic training that's going to help launch you from the university into working environments where feedback's part of what you'll get. So this might be a little bit of cold water of a feeling, but it's also really good water. And it's intended to be a challenge that brings you face to face with the limitations of what you produced. And from somebody else's eyes, they can see that better than you can see it. And to hear back from other people's eyes, it's a good process. I tend to be slow at receiving critical feedback. I tend to, first of all, perhaps think, well, they just didn't get it. And then normally, if I let it sit and I go back to it, I found out they got it there, they got it there, they nailed it. But I couldn't hear that the first time I read critical feedback. So I want to encourage you to, have those first reactions to somebody else's feedback, but go back. Give it a day, give it 2 days. Go back to it before our next writing project. Then give it a week, give it 2 weeks. See whether you can now understand how they saw your paper. What else do I want to say about this? It's as important that you have kind of taken off your writer's glasses and put on your editor's glasses, and that you have seen from a distance how the structural integrity of a paper succeeded or did not succeed. And the hope is, next time you've written, our stage 2 paper, you take off your glasses, you put it away for a day because you're ahead of schedule. You put on those editor glasses and you say, how would this look if I was Amanda? How would this look if I was Gina? How would this look if I was somebody else looking at my paper? And you will have gained this kind of whoop process that helps remove you from reading and understanding absolutely everything you wrote, and it made perfect sense, towards having that capacity to have a distance from your own writing. So that's a big experience. It's an important experience for the development of your critical thinking skills, is literally to separate yourself from attachment to your ideas to analysis of the integrity of your ideas. When it comes to constructive criticism that somebody else is going to be hearing, I think if you were wondering to yourself, can I really say this to them? The question is, your job here is not to teach them how to write, but is to be helpful to them. So wherever they are at in the writing process, there is a way to be helpful. So you get to ask yourself, how can I articulate what I see in a way that could be helpful to the person reading it? And the clarity, and when I say clarity, I could mean a little bit of bluntness. The clarity with which you say it will both help or hinder how well they can receive the information. And hopefully with a little time, they will thank you for the clearest eye you can bring to their success in communicating. All right, a last bit of word here about what are these feet doing on the screen. In terms of how awkward is writing a peer review, there's a chance it's as awkward as a room full of 101 feet, truncated, each of which, you can't tell this from this picture, is filled with water. And in the background of this installation, you would hear the sound of feet running. So this is a friend of mine, and I've got her information down here on the bottom, Pritika Chaudhry. I met her at a conference on women's religious lives. She's an artist who tries to think about the diaspora and what it means when bodies have had to move across the earth, and where their cultural and religious identities have been tied to the reason they are crossing the earth. So in this case, this installation is called 101 Feet. She chose feet because feet are androgynous, and she is depicting the time when India went through its partition. I realize this is not African American religious culture when I start talking about India, but hopefully I'll bring you background to this connection. During the partition, when Muslims moved to what is now Pakistan and Hindus moved to India, and a line was created against which people, their identity and their sense of belonging was articulated on maps by drawing a line that partitioned two people who had been living together. A great deal of violence ensued. And you'll see this question of line. We're going to start hearing about the veil when we read next week. How race can create a line between people. Once you have lines starting to be drawn between people, those lines can function like altars upon which difference gets offered as a sacrifice. So religious violence is very interesting, and when you start seeing lines being drawn, know that it's one of those places then where people will live and die for the meaning of being on one side or the other side of that line. And so if we relate this to African American religious culture, what happens on the race line is that it's a matter of living and dying, which people belong on which side of which lines, and how the crossing of that line actually became, in the United States, a matter of death for especially black people crossing towards white people. So, and so let me try to wrap this up, how it relates to how awkward is it to write a peer review. There is a writing in and of itself is a transformative process through which you are developing your intellectual skills, but you are traveling. There is a movement that is happening from when we began this class through this process. The peer review itself might feel like an awkward, truncated experience of feedback where you might not like what you read, and you might not like the experience of commenting on somebody else's writing. But the very process of moving through this together and trying to consciously reflect on how does this engagement, we are crossing a line, we are extending a perspective to each other. How might our online classroom, our online workshop, actually facilitate creativity and human connection, even though it might at first grate against a personal sense of space, a personal sense of comfort. I hope that this writing process can be as serious for you as seriously engaging with these wonderful texts we are reading, and that we will all travel together through this in ways that enhance our humanity as a creative community, as a research community, but that it does entail awkward. There's a risk we're all taking in doing this, and I'll just leave it at that. I hope that by tonight the reviews are all there, and each of you is able to receive as well as to have given that review in the spirit of traveling together through our material and enhancing our capacity as citizens to be creative, to be constructive, and to improve our skills through this process. Thanks for listening.